help somebody when they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. All right? Number 4, they start to form communities, whether functional or dysfunctional, because they're trying to achieve a goal, so they surround themselves with like-minded people that will help them achieve their goal, whatever that goal is. They gather support. They go public with their values and visions in order to gather more support. So they'll say, this is how we are. Or in the case of, I taught high school, we had loner kids who would stand together and say, we're all loners. Do you get that? Right? Yeah. 4th, then they try to garner or they get moral leverage because they have a critical mass and they appeal to higher moral values. They're able to actually make systemic change happen. All right? So let's get to the 7 deadly sins. First is the maternal and paternalistic attitudes that organizations typically have. Second, we think that we know more than the person that we're trying to help. The more we look, the more we find. We are the government and we're here to help. We get paid off of poverty. Many of our organizations get paid off of poverty. We don't challenge systems that we know are unjust or unfair. And lastly, we beat people up with the rules. All right? So, we'll talk a little bit about this. So, a lot of our organizations are built on the premise that the people who are coming to us are broken. And that we have the answers to fix them, or we have to caretake for them. Now, people will often ask, well, Andre, how does this apply to vulnerable adults? Right? Don't we have to take care of them? Shouldn't we have a paternal or maternal approach when working with them? So I'll ask you the question. For vulnerable adults and vulnerable people, do we have an obligation to protect them? Yes, we have an obligation to protect them. That obligation does not mean that we have to be maternal or paternal. What's the difference between those two terms? Are people familiar with those two terms? Maternal means what? Motherly, right? And nurturing. And in this context, I mean it in a negative way. It is not always meant in a negative way in other contexts. But in this particular context, I mean that in a negative way. That we become too nurturing to the fact that people can't develop themselves. Or paternalistic, meaning that we become so that we mandate to people what their goals should be. And so what happens when we tell people what their goals should be? What is their natural reaction? Rebellion. So we push, and they naturally what? Push back. All right? So that's their natural reaction. And also, we take away people's responsibility. One of the things that I think is so interesting in social services is that when we have a family who's having some difficulties, one of the things that happens is that children are taken out of the home. And in some cases, that needs to happen. I don't think in all cases that needs to happen. Because what happens when we take the kids out of the home?
You can't fix the home because it's not fully functional with the people that are in it creating the problems.
So the people who are in it that are creating the problems can't function together, but what else? You become the paternal or the maternal object, but then the people who should be raising these kids have a free day. Woo! I'm up in the club now. Hey, I haven't been a teen in all these years, and so now my children are gone. So, is there any real inclination to necessarily get that level of responsibility back? No. Until people are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and then also until they understand that they need to be healed. And so, so there are no rewards for taking back responsibility. Who wants more responsibility? Anybody, please raise your hand if you want more responsibility than you already have. Oh, go ahead, girl. Go ahead. I got something for you too. All right. So there's that. We say that we know more, and because we are professionals and I believe that we need to have knowledge about things, but we need to have knowledge to help facilitate someone else's change, right? Apple trees do not grow apples for themselves. They don't brag to other apple trees. Apple tree, I got 17,000 apples. And the other one's, oh, I only got 300 apples, right? That fruit is produced to do what? To feed somebody else, right? To give out to somebody else. And there is a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. So I can read about poverty all day long. But until I've had an experience with poverty, I can't say that I know what you're going through. I may be able to understand or empathize, but I can't say that I know, because there's a difference between knowing the path and actually walking it. The more you look at a thing, the more you find. We had a situation when I worked at Anoka County where we were doing an intervention with a family, and so the parent actually reached out to the county and said, "Do you have any services or coaching that you can do with our family, because we want to? There's some things we got to work out." And so what did the county say? Sure, right? Sure. So they got a social worker on the case. The social worker came and looked at the family and said, "Okay, yeah, we got some services. You need to do this, this, and this." And so the parents said, "Okay." And so they started this process. And then the social worker said, "Oh, you missed this. So let me get some more services so you can get that." So they went and got some more services. And so another set of service providers came in, looked at the situation, looked at the family, and said, "Oh, you did this, this, and this. Oh, but you missed this. So I have another set of services that we can offer you so that we can get you this." Now, the whole time, the parent came to us for help. And now we're complaining as the system that the parent is being detached from the thing that they were asking for help. And why? Because every time we looked at this family, we saw more and more what? Problems. And the more that we look at that, the more we, as professionals, can see those problems. And we also were looking at deficit approaches. What's wrong with this family, as opposed to what are the family's strengths, right? I want you to think about another cultural group and the stereotypes that people say about that group, right? So they're drunks, they're thieves, they're unemployed, they're blah, 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 blah. Now I want you to search your family tree for those same things. Do you have a drunk in your family? You don't have to answer this, right? Do you have a thief in your family? Do you have a person that doesn't work in your family, right? At the same time, I would not necessarily say to you that those people are, or that your family does not have strengths. I would say that your family does have strengths, and we need to pay more attention to that than we do the deficits. You love some of those family members not because of their weaknesses or their deficits, but you love them because of the strengths that they have. You're able to overlook and help them overcome some of those deficits because of the care that you have for them. We are the government. We're here to help. And I mentioned this before. Systems are developed and designed to benefit who? Systems themselves. And who helps people in organizations? People help people in organizations, right? So schools are designed to benefit schools. The kids are secondary, but who helps the kids?
People.
The teachers and the support staff who love those kids in ways that allow them to grow, all right? We get paid off of poverty. We incentivize our systems, right, in a negative way. I was talking with some county sheriffs, and one of the things that they were complaining about in our correctional institutions is that in the juvenile detention center, the numbers are down. So they're trying to strategize how to get more kids to fill the beds in the juvenile center. I'm not. I wish I could make this stuff up. This is real. So people actually sit around and try to figure out our jails aren't full enough. Our systems aren't operating in because we have these federal funds and we have these state funds and we have to spend. Because if we don't spend it, then we lose it, right? So we, instead of looking at supporting the fact that crime is down, or we don't have a lot of kids in the institutions, and saying that's a good job, so we'll give you some resources to continue that progress, we look at it in a very deficit model. And bureaucracy works. What is a bureaucracy? What's a bureaucracy? It's a monster. Okay. It's layers of complications designed by whom? The government, not the government. People who are not what? Elected. Bureaucracies are systems that are designed by people who are not elected. Elected people create what kind of?
Democracies.
They create democracies, but they have the legislature behind them, right? So they create laws. People like you and I create bureaucracies because we're not elected, all right? And they work. Now, bureaucracies are designed, originally the intent was designed to make sure that the most qualified people participated in a system. But now we use bureaucracy as a tool to keep people out or to frustrate the heck out of them. One of the things that I find in, I sit on a number of boards, and I have to explain this to community members who, because I was one of them before I sat on a number of boards and understood the system, that Robert's Rules of Order is actually to frustrate the heck out of people coming off the street. Because they don't understand the language, they don't understand why we do all this stuff, and why do I need a here and a therefore and all that kind of stuff. It is a bureaucracy, a system set up by people to try to slow down the system so qualified people can do it, so we can manage how many manage our resources. But what it's turned into is a tool to keep people out. All right. As helpers, we typically don't challenge the system. We see discriminatory practices and we say nothing. We don't say anything. I wonder what it would be like if all the social workers got together and said that trying to work full-time and go to school full-time and not getting any aid for kids or supplements for kids to go to school doesn't work for people. I wonder what would happen if all the social workers who see this happen on a day-to-day basis actually stood up for their clients in a systematic way, as opposed to just having one or two stand up in their own individual ways, right? I wonder if the legislature would hear that as opposed to hearing people say, well, thinking that allowing people to go to school is taking work out of welfare, as opposed to understanding that education and training is a path off of welfare, right? And we're typically silent observers. We'll see stuff or we'll know something that is not equitable and we won't say anything. And why won't we say anything? We don't want to buck the system, but what's the consequence of bucking the system? We lose our jobs. So because the system, we become implicit in the system, we don't want to say anything because we don't want to disrupt the waters because it's going to impact us. So why do we end up serving? We started out serving other people, but we end up serving whom? Ourselves. Ourselves. If we're not careful. All right? We beat people up with a rule. We do discretionary allocation. It's funny. I've met with a number of social workers, and they're child protection folks or folks dealing with what is it when the father pays child support, right? And they have the power to sanction someone. Does anyone know what a sanction means? I mean, I'm sure you know what the overall term is, but in a welfare context, a sanction means that whatever grants or monies you were eligible for, you will not be getting that because of a certain set of criteria that is at the social worker's discretion. Right? So we sanction people at our discretion. So we